Hey guys, it's Cory. No one person can change the world, but leaders everywhere can.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Rippled Radio. Hello, Ripplers. We got another great one today, and another personal connection from my past that has resurfaced in my current life. And it makes me really happy to introduce you all to Coach Bob. And those of you that are viewing this, not just listening to it, he looks like Coach Bob. You wouldn't guess he's in a boardroom. You might think he's on the side of a football field, which maybe you have been. I don't know if we've ever talked prior sports before. What sports? Did you ever coach a sport, Bob?
I coached youth football for 12 years, so
Youth
lots of fun.
football. I can
You know,
see that. You look the part.
then the boys outgrew it, and now I have to wait for grandkids to coach. So it's all good, though. All good.
Well, listen, you're on your way. I know you've got that in the plans here. So today we're not talking about the football field. We're talking about the office. And I met Coach Bob years ago, and I think my first exposure to you was a disc profile.
Yep.
And after that, we've had the opportunity to interact in many different ways. You've been working with us at 1RDG on some content, and you and I had a meeting one day that, and you said something that stuck in my mind. And this meeting was probably 8 months ago now. But as we were planning this season, I had some experiences that brought it back. And the whole concept of today is going to be about self-leadership. So I'm going to share just that moment that triggered this episode. I'm a big fan of leadership. I focus a lot on what leaders should do to make the world a better place, to make their team stronger, how highly accountable leaders should be to their environment. And I mentioned something in our meeting, and I said, the leaders, they didn't do X, Y, and Z, and they should have, and that left the people in this place. And you said something along the lines of, yes, but shouldn't they be able to handle that and manage it for themselves and speak up as well? And you caught me, because as much as I want leaders to be great, I also think people should be accountable and resilient and see two
Absolutely.
sides and not be entitled. And so I want to start there, Bob, because as a leadership coach, you have a balanced view of self-leadership and team leadership.
Yeah,
And so I'm wondering if we could start there today. How do you balance that, what a leader should bring to the table and what people should bring to the table as part of a team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge always is, you get hired to come in and support leaders in their work and developing as leaders. But a lot of times, again, we can provide the tools, but I think at the end of the day, most effective leaders have great teams, and those great teams are individuals who are willing to kind of meet leaders halfway, right? Not expecting the leader to necessarily always have all the answers, not expecting the leader to have to always provide direction or, always dictate actions and all the rest of that stuff. So I think, it's pretty easy to be a great effective leader and learn and develop when you have a team that's, accountable for their actions, self-starting, right? Highly motivated, passionate about the work that they do. When you have highly effective teams that, communicate regularly. And I think most of all, ask for help, right? And, have boundaries where if I got some work that I don't think I can handle, I'm asking for assistance on that and letting my leader know that. So I think, it's a two-way street. So a lot of times I think it's like, our leaders are broken. And I always say, well, yeah, that might not be the case totally. You don't have broken leaders. You have people that are developing, but you also have to have, people around the leaders that are really playing their part. So I think that balance is really critical. And I just encourage team members to, own that, right? Don't pin it on the organization. Don't pin it on the leaders. What components are you accountable for? Yes, you might need some additional tools. Yes, you might need some resources. Are you asking for those? Are you getting those and things? But I do believe there's a great balance to be had there. So anybody approaching, I think, leadership development or training or whatever, I think we just have to kind of keep that in mind. How are we positioning team members to be their best and support leaders? And how do we, help leaders be great leaders and support their team members?
You said earlier in your sentences right here, we can't expect leaders to do everything and provide all the direction, and we can't expect leaders to be perfect.
Oh, no way.
And I see that sometimes, and since we had that conversation, this memory came back to me of when I was a young individual contributor, and I might have been in a little bit of a high point ego wise, maybe not at my best self. And I had a boss who was a great guy. And I think he was a new leader, as I'm reflecting on all of this. And I left a team meeting and I didn't think the team meeting was very good. And I didn't think it was valuable to me. And I happened to make a comment to that extent to somebody, thinking that they were going to agree with me or validate me or something. And instead they said, Raji, did you help him? Did you offer to help him? I would never comment negatively on somebody's meeting that they were trying to make great unless I said, hey, how can I help you? And boy,
Sure.
did that person put me in my place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, just you don't think of that, right? It's easy
No,
to
and I was so
easy to forget.
embarrassed after that. Like, what a jerk I was. And so that day that you said that, I thought, my God, I'm doing it again. People have to be great self leaders too. Not wait around for great leadership, especially if they are an aspiring leader someday, because our
Absolutely.
question to them will be, what did you do to lead more effectively in whatever role that you were in?
Sure.
So if you were talking to a young professional or somebody aspiring to leadership, but they're still in an individual contributor role, what advice do you give them on how to, what is self-leadership and where do you start? What are we even talking about right now?
Yeah, I think again, in my opinion, and I'll make reference. I'm lucky enough and feeling grateful to be down here in Hilton Head Island
Yeah,
for a couple
also for
weeks
people
with
that aren't
with.
watching and just listening, they can't see that you are in palm trees under an
Yeah, it's,
umbrella.
there's worse places to be. I'm actually hanging at the Tiki Hut bar down here on Hilton Head Island, but we're finishing up a few weeks of being down here, so pretty fun. But making reference, I think one of the things I was thinking about was when I work with one of my focuses is promotional readiness coaching, and I think my biggest advice I always give people is, and I just talked to somebody yesterday, very successful young lady. In the engineering arena, she's heading in a couple different directions and things. And I think if you were a surfer and you had an opportunity, you would always make your own wave, right? You would always make your own wave. It would be the perfect wave every time. You would ride that sucker out, right? Everybody would be cheering because it was like just this awesome wave, right? No variables. I don't, obviously surfers don't have that opportunity. The ocean dictates that, right? So, but I think to some extent, people have the ability to make their own waves. How are you creating those opportunities? And as I was talking with this young lady, she was mentioning, hey, grad school, and when I graduate in 3 years, and 3 years goes by pretty fast, and I'm listening. She goes, maybe I'll get this opportunity or that opportunity. I go, maybe you will, and maybe you won't, but I can guarantee that it'll happen faster if you decide you're going to today. Right. And you put a
Mhm.
stake in the ground. Right. So within 4 years, I want to start my own engineering company, or within 4 years, I want to be a director level person in this particular practice area. And I think that's really, really important. So what I mean by make your own wave is, what actions are you taking to advance your career? Right. If I want to be healthy when I'm 80, I got to start doing stuff now, not when I'm 80, right? It doesn't make sense. So I think that's the missing link a lot. I work with a lot of high caliber, high potential young leaders, and they are really highly self-motivated. It's just pinpointing what actions am I taking to kind of create my own momentum, right? Or in the world of ripple, right? Create your own personal ripples, if you will. A little action today is going to, open up opportunities and things I can be working on and doing the next wherever that ripple is going out, right? It's touching different people. And the universe is powerful. I told her, I said, if you put that out there, all of a sudden these opportunities present themselves. Hey, I need to talk to, one VP a month for the next 12 months. I need to, because I want to explore whether I even want that job, right? I need to go out and talk to someone who started an engineering company within the last 5 years and use my association memberships to kind of access those opportunities. So she was a member of a lot of places, but pulled really thin. And I think, again, it's not about, creating way too much more to do. But I think for young leaders, it's being very strategic, pinpointing some actionable items, and that may be just little things that can really create big opportunities, So when I think of self leadership, it's, I don't think anybody lacks self motivation that are these high potential folks.
Mhm.
I think self leadership's about making sure that, you're not just doing more, doing more, doing more, and it's not really focused in and impacting, the direction you want to have, or focus and commitment go a long way. Exactly what do you want to do, and how do you want to, let's get clear on how to do that. I'm also a big believer in your inner guidance system. Early in my career, when I
What did you
first
say, your
started,
inner guiding system?
inner guidance system. Yeah, we called it that. I worked with a consultant, Tom Brady, locally to Rochester for a while, and had a, again, as a mentor, great guy. But we did a leadership week, and we worked on personal mission, vision, values, and that's kind of what's pushing you in certain directions. And I was fairly young, right? So that was 27, 28 years ago, 30 years ago, I guess. But that was always stuck with me, the idea of being clear on kind of, my values, what's important to me. If family's important, I'm going to make decisions based on that. If support is important, I'm going to take actions in alignment with that, regardless of the role I'm in and what I'm doing. What purpose do I have? How do I want to serve other people? So personal leadership to me, I think, that's a big deal, because you're acting from a place where you feel pretty solid. And I just think, the younger you are, or I would say earlier in your career, that you can entertain some of these things. And I do work with a lot of high potential leaders in the programs where we do this work. I think that just sets such a solid foundation, right? Because I really don't believe a lot of the people I work with, like I said, are highly motivated, high potential people. So just learning a little bit about, where you're operating from, your own personal kind of foundation, if you will, goes a long way for sure.
I had to grab a pen. I just wrote down so many little triggers of things that you said that I want to go back to. So, one of the things that really stands out to me about what you said is what the things are that guide your decision making for the future. And I wish I had learned at a younger age about the concept of non-negotiables. Once I got clear on, as I was planning to advance my career, what are the things I had to have in a job? What are the things that I had to have that allowed me certain things in my personal life? It created a lot of clarity on a path forward. For
Sure.
me, it was things like I needed to be in a position that I felt could make an impact in some way, that I had the opportunity to make an impact in an organization, that it challenged me, that there was a path to growth. Outside of work, I needed it to be, I needed to have dinner with my kids at night, the
Yep.
majority of the time. I didn't want to be a road warrior living on a plane.
Hmm.
I needed to have a certain level of ownership over my time. And once I got to that, as I evaluated opportunities, you quickly sort of knew which ones were for you, but I had to do that reflective work
Right.
first.
Absolutely.
Is one thing. The other theme that I love as I'm listening to you is this constant personal accountability. You you don't advise people to wait for their organization to do something for them to start a career development group to get for them to jump in on. There's a little bit out there right now of, well, what is my development path and what has it done for me? And no one gave me that opportunity. And that flies in the face of what you're talking about.
Right.
You're
Right.
talking
I mean,
about
I was
creating it for yourself.
huge. Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer. Even when I first started and worked in HR early on, I worked for Wegmans, right? Obviously, a great
Yeah.
organization, all kinds of career paths available to people and things. And we had career plans in place, but I told every single employee, as an employee, rep, I said, don't. It's not up to the organization, right? And I think organizations oftentimes have all types of resources available. Employees hear about them in orientation, and then they're kind of quickly forgotten. But whose fault is that, right?
Mhm.
So I think that if you want to wait around to get tapped on the shoulder, you'll probably get promoted if you're a really hard worker and you're doing all the right things and all the right stuff. If you want to wait around, that's fine. But if you want to cut the time in half, get promoted quicker, put yourself in a position where you have higher levels of influence and can be supporting and making a bigger difference for more people through a leadership role and scope of work, decide that then, right? I mean, it's going to expedite stuff, right? So again, if I tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, Cory, can you be my mentor? And this is what I want to do. And by when I want to do it, that was the most powerful thing I did in my career. I met with my director of HR and we put together a development plan. And I said, hey, I want to make this much money. My current role's fine, but this is my salary I'd like to have. How do I accomplish that, in the next 2 years? And, she was empowered to advocate for me. And, I got a chance to ride along with, operational folks, and I got a chance to work on special projects related to, customer focus groups. I was involved in continuous improvement projects that involved operations, right? So I had those opportunities because I had that conversation, and I think there's all kinds of awesome people willing to help us, but we have to be willing to, state what our intentions are and then be open to that help. I think that's really, really powerful. Young people, ask for help, ask people to be involved in your success. It's not a bother. I mean, most people are lit up by that. I had a participant in one of my leadership programs, and her development plan was basically to hers was maybe encouraging the heart practice wise, similar work that we're doing, but she actually created an interview with 10 questions that she interviewed all of the senior level leaders in her organization. And when I asked her about it, she said it was crazy information they shared, but some of her questions were really good and self-reflecting questions for those senior leaders. And multiple leaders said, it's so fun that I get a chance to think about this and answer these, actually reflect on my own leadership and, hopefully, impact, obviously contribute and impact to yours. But again, who has those conversations,
What a
So
great way to stand out too. I
yeah,
mean,
I
no
mean,
one would
huge.
forget somebody that did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? And this person, again, in HR, but, I said, you got a chance to have a really good quality conversation with some senior level people, really well thought out questions. And obviously those leaders really appreciate an opportunity to chat about that stuff, So I think there's a perceptional barrier out there that just because folks are in those COO and CAO and, VP positions that they're so busy that you don't want to bother them. And on the flip side, they probably wanted those jobs so that they could help more people in the organization. And I think that can be a refreshing thought for people. Don't think you're a bother, because most people, if they embrace their leadership roles and they're good humans, part of why they want to be an effective leader and deal with all the rest of the stress is they feel they can make a bigger difference, in their roles. So tap people, ask for help. To your point too, what I love too, Cory, that you mentioned was setting boundaries based on you mentioned your personal values and what was important to you. But that I think is another thing people are afraid to do is you don't have to say no necessarily, but you need to say, hey, if you want me to do this, this has to give, or, that's outside of what I'm comfortable doing, or, I don't have the knowledge to do this as fast as you want. What are your thoughts? Right. And I think people are afraid to set boundaries, and I think, or feel like, it's going to reflect negatively on their performance. And I think people are, they're not comfortable asking for help and support or those
Hands
things.
down the hardest thing for me to learn.
Yeah.
I needed so much help from mentors around me. I remember calling people when I hit moments in my career where I realized I was a little upside down in what my commitments were. And I remember calling people that I had seen manage their careers well and saying to them, what do? I feel stuck.
Sure.
And once I understood that, and we could do a whole session just on that. You can't oversimplify it because it's hard. But once I did that, the freedom I felt in my career, I was more empowered and I performed better because my stress and my fear went away.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something else that you said in here. You mentioned taking your career development on as your own. And I remember hearing leaders say, don't wait around for your company to do it for you. Your development is your responsibility. And if you don't understand it and you don't listen closely, it sounds like they're putting the onus back on you.
Mhm.
What I want people to understand is The reason it's your responsibility is because that's when it's effective.
Right.
That's when if somebody's doing it for you, then you're not getting the full kind of concentrate out of that juice, right? You get good by doing it, by owning it, by advocating for yourself. That's why they're telling you that.
Yeah. And
Um,
by the way, not everybody wants their boss's job, right?
Also that. So why would they just do it for everyone? Because who knows who wants it?
Right. I mean, people, and I think it's hard because people don't even know what they want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's a fear of commitment, and I'm like, why wouldn't you commit? You can always change your mind. I'm like, it's
Right.
not like, right? So, but if you don't make a commitment and you don't empower people around you to know and be clear on at least your initial direction, right? And learning about that. So as I was chatting with the young engineer person, I said, even if you change your mind, that's okay. But at least between now and when you change your mind,
Go all in.
you're exploring a couple different directions. And what's
Yeah.
going to happen through the exploration process, one, you're excited about it because it's yours. And secondly, through that exploration process, the right opportunities are going to present themselves. You're going to be so clear on what you don't want to do, which is as powerful as what you do want to do, right? And I said, if that's the answer, so be it. I said, but to your point, I think that people have to own that. I can't tell you what you want to do. I can sit here and explore things with you. And even if you don't know what you want to do, pick a couple things so that it provides, some direction and some, I would say momentum, right? That you can kind of create. And then the right opportunities, they always present themselves. And I think you'll have a higher level of awareness too if you own your own career development. I always say it's like, I want to be a VP. Well, now all of a sudden I'm going to notice every single thing and every single opportunity and every single person, right? That's going to help me do that. Now I'm looking through a different lens than if I haven't decided that, right? Now my brain doesn't even know what to look for. So I think the power, and like you were saying, that is when I make that individual commitment on my own, it doesn't have to be an exact thing, but it has to be a direction. It provides, I know I'm going to be self-motivated in that capacity. My brain's going to, be noticing opportunities. There's nothing on my radar that's going to go by without me saying or looking at it in a way that says, how does that help me be a VP? And that's the power, right? That expedites everything. So anyway, I love it. I mean, I think that's so important, is to your point, own it. If you own it, it makes a huge difference than people be dictating anything. Nobody wants someone to say, you're going to be the next manager. Well, maybe I want to be, maybe I don't want to be, right? But if I say I want to be the next manager, that's a different story, for sure.
I want to switch gears a tiny bit because, we started out talking about what you need to do for yourself. And I know you've probably coached people through situations where maybe they don't have a great boss.
Right.
Maybe they are highly motivated, or maybe they need some better direction, but they're working for someone who either is in their way or they feel like doesn't have their best interest in mind. Maybe they're taking credit. There's a million scenarios because, again, leaders are not perfect. And also there's some maybe pretty weak ones out there.
Sure.
When somebody comes to you and says, my boss is my problem,
right,
where do you start? What do they do? Is it only find a new job? I mean, what's the answer?
Well, I think a couple things. One, you can do such a kick-ass job that you get your boss promoted, then they're not your boss anymore. That's good, right? So, I mean, make them look so good that somebody has to promote them. And who cares if it was your fault? They're out of your way now. So that's good. The other thing, and it opens up their job for you, right? Then you can be a better boss, which is good.
Right.
But I think the other thing is too, I always say there's no rule on your boss has to be the linchpin in your development. Right. So I think if I was working with someone where I could learn everything not to do, right? Why is this leader ineffective? Why is their management tactics terrible? Why do they frustrate and stress me out? Right? Why does the team, wander around in a CYA mentality so they don't get beat up from their boss? All these terrible things that you hear stories about over the last 25 years. But I think all that being said, I'm going to reach out then and I'll have my boss in the loop. But if I own my own career development, I'm going to be saying it's important for me to be talking with other folks in the organization. Who are the good leaders, right? I'm going to reach out to them and create a relationship with those leaders in the organization. And if I can't do that, I'm going to be reaching out to people in roles that, again, could maybe, I'll use the word mentor, but I don't think it has to be formal. But reach out to people that are good leaders, right? Whether they're in the community, whether that they're at other organizations in the industry. So I think, again, a pretty easy excuse is I got a bad boss, so I'm stuck. Well, you're never stuck. Make a decision. Yeah, you could quit. If you don't want to quit, rough it out, make your boss look good in the meantime, really positively influence people. So, everybody knows you're a good egg, and then reach outside of those, expand those boundaries outside so that you can kind of take control of that influence, go hang out with people that are going to be helpful to you. Don't spend as little time as you can with your boss, as needed, and build your development outside of that.
It reminds me of, I always use the analogy with people when they come to me that their boss isn't giving them something that they need, right? That when you're a baby, you can survive on a bottle and maybe some rice cereal for a pretty long time. And then after a while, you add in baby food and you get the puffs. And before you know it, you're on solids and food groups. And then you turn into macros and protein and all these nutrients. And as you grow, what you need to thrive grows. So, your first job out of college, maybe that first supervisor is enough for you. But when you get beyond that, you can't expect one person to feed you. You're going to need different food groups. So you have to diversify those influences. And I always try to think of it, create your own personal board of directors. Who do you go to when you have technical questions? Who do you go to when you have leadership questions? Who do you go to when you have networking questions? Like,
Right.
you've got to broaden that palette also. Because your boss will never be the singular source of development, guidance, advice, anything for you.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think not only broadening your network, but be purposeful on the relationships. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of what you can do to really expedite the impact, right? Is I always tell people, I'll go have coffee with anybody. You want to shoot the breeze, right? But if you're shooting the breeze with me and trying to network, you better be able to tell me, what jobs you're interested in. What are the titles, across, if I go search LinkedIn, what are multiple titles of jobs? What types of industries? Do you want to stay in the same industry, different industry? Are you looking to stay in Rochester? You're looking to get outside of Rochester, right? And you'll be surprised at how many people will be like, Bob, can you go, network coffee? And I start asking questions and they have no answers. And I'm like, that's fine. Let's shoot the breeze about family. I'll just show you pictures of my granddaughter, hey, talk about vacations. I'm not against that. But it doesn't really help that person. And so to your point, not only I think your own personal board of directors, but as you interact with them, be very specific on how they can help you. Because that's really, really important. I mentioned professional associations, and being a member of professional associations is great, right? You're expanding your network, but being a member of a professional association and knowing that I'm going to search the membership base for a specific 3 or 4 people who are doing exactly what I want to do. And I'm going to reach out to those people. It's not by accident that I'm going to run into them at some conference. You know what I mean? It's very specifically, just as a consultant, if I go to a networking event and I want to work for a certain organization, I'm going to know who's there from the certain organization, and I'm going to find the person, right, to talk with. So I think, again, I think that's really, really important is, again, outside of, you can't, don't allow, I think, don't allow other people to dictate, where you're at in your own success. We all have the power of making decisions. Decide not to work for the person, decide to incorporate other people in your professional life that's going to make a difference. And I think the more purposeful you can be with the time you spend with those people, it just really creates a huge value,
Such
for
great
you,
advice.
for the,
Purposeful networking. I really, really love that. You've been in this business for a while, and you've probably seen many landscapes, themes, trends, changes in what's asked of you as a coach. What can you say? And I'm so putting you on the spot with this. I didn't put this in an email. We didn't chat about it, but I know you're going to have a great answer. What's unique about right now, either trying to get promoted or leading people? Are you seeing things in the past year or two that you hadn't seen before?
Well, I mean, everybody talks about kind of a COVID generation and, young people and the influence of technology. And it was one influence or another, right? This time it's technology and and making things a little bit more challenging because it's different from kind of maybe, 5 or 10 years ago. But you have to keep in mind, for me, I dealt with that with people 15 or 20 years ago. There was changes, right? Or whatever those things were. So I think there's always those hurdles of, who are we getting into the workforce and what are our expectations. I'll say right now, if you're a young professional, and I don't care what industry, there is a gap in middle level leaders, and there's going to be a bigger one. We just did a panel discussion in regards to engineering and architecture, and I think that 1/3 of engineers are retiring. Right, they're 55 or older. Think about that, right? That level of experience of 20, 30 years of experience is exiting very, very quickly, and we're seeing the average age of middle level leaders between 25 and 30, like 32, right? Crazy. And I don't mean that they're not capable. I'm just saying that 25 to 32 does not have the same level of work experience, right?
Mm.
And professional experience as people that were in those roles, 15, 20, 25 years ago, who weren't in those roles until they had 15 years of experience. So twice as much experience doing the same jobs in a much more volatile, I think, environment in regards to change, information, technology. While we want to throw stones at young people and say that it's they're not learning fast enough, or hey, well, how come they're not flexing more capability in these roles? I think we're just expecting a lot more from our younger generations coming into the workforce out of need, out of necessity. It's not even a matter of choice, right? So I think they feel those pressures. So something to keep in mind. I would say, I'm all for promote fast if you can, but make sure the people we're promoting have the tools and resources to do the work. And again, that's where my passion falls. I love working with young leaders. I think that if you can help them understand some of the things we've been talking about today, and they can really stop and take a breath long enough, if they can ask the organization for some space, if they can create some of that space for themselves and for other folks, we start filling some of those holes, and that can be really powerful. So just, that's my thought. I don't think I have any other crazy answer on that, but I do think that that's some of the challenges that we're facing right now. But I do believe for people out there that want to step into first level management and leadership roles, there's going to be a lot of those available, and it's just a matter of what do they look like in 3 years from now, if that's something that you're pursuing, right? Let's get ready for what the role looks like in 3 years instead of what the world looks like today. And we work on that stuff, and the idea of promotional readiness is, you got to be able to do your boss's job, but not your boss's job today. You got to be able to do your boss's job when you get your boss's job, which is probably going to be 12 to 24 months from today, and that may look a little bit different.
Two things about what you said. One is you're so non-judgmental. I think one of my favorite things every time I meet with you is that there's nothing hoity-toity or condescendingly academic about what you say. You do such a good job of seeing both sides. And I'm glad that you said this isn't a today's youth problem. Like, we're expecting a lot of this generation. And I think that's such a great thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
And that level of sort of empathy and humility. The other thing that you said, there's always something. It's kind of like every generation makes fun of their kids' music. So 20 years ago it was something else, 10 years ago it was something else, today it's COVID and technology, whatever. It's always going to be something, and you have to find a way to work through it. But truly, Bob, every time I talk to you, and I've been talking to you for close to 20 years, I get something so cool from the way that you look at things. And it's actually very apropos that you're sitting on a beach, because as much as you're an upstate New York guy, there is you have a little bit of surfer dude in you.
Surfer dude.
It's going to be okay. Everybody do your best, create your own wave, make your own ripples. We couldn't have a better guy on the show today. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing for our organization, for what you're doing for the Ripplers that are listening today, and what you're doing for everybody that you talk to. Like, it makes me happy that people in the world are getting your advice.
Hey,
and
I
if that doesn't belong on Rippled Radio, Bob, I don't know what does. That is awesome.
It's a pleasure. And I could flip this around. And next time we get together, I should be interviewing you since you're a pretty successful lady in and of yourself in your leadership roles. So something
Hey,
to
I'm
think
just
about. All
listening.
right.
Listen, I'd love to be interviewed, but I'll tell you, it's because I've been taught by some great people. So we're going to keep things
Fair
moving
enough.
good. Listen, thank you for being a guest today. Listen, everybody, Coach Bob Peter, Insights to Improvement, awesome guy. Keep talking to people, Bob. You are making the world better, and I just appreciate you. And enjoy that weather and safe travels back to upstate.
All right. Band's just starting to play here on the beach. So I might just turn left and hang out for a couple minutes.
Perfect
So pleasure to
timing.
be here. Love
Thanks,
it.
Bob.
Thanks. Talk soon, Cory. See ya.
1, 2, 3.
Hey Ripplers, let's make our impact even bigger. If you enjoyed today's content, please like, share, leave a review, all the things. You know what to do. Thank you.